The nations of the world must unite to strongly push back China. Otherwise, if China succeeds in taking the South China Sea or in making the South China Sea its own national lake, denying the application of UNCLOS in the South China Sea, then UNCLOS will collapse, or other naval powers will also seize their near seas as their own possessions. That will mean the demise of UNCLOS and the end of a rules.
That was retired Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio warning that the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, or UNCLOS, faces collapse if China takes over the South China Sea.
But even before that happens, the country deploys 3 additional Navy ships to the territory, building what is its biggest presence yet in the West Philippine Sea. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Let's start with the Philippines filing 2 diplomatic protests today concerning the lingering presence of Chinese militia vessels in the West Philippine Sea.
The Armed Forces of the Philippines is also building up its sovereignty patrols with the deployment of more ships. But will these be enough to defend the Philippines territory? Pat Maune has the big story.
Recent satellite images show that the Philippines is weak in defending its own territorial waters. If Vietnam has 29 outposts, the Philippines only has 11 to keep an eye on its exclusive economic zone.
We've seen how much weaker the Philippines is in protecting their territory compared to the other claimants. If this weakness continues, we will surely see more features being occupied by foreign countries.
But the Philippines is beefing up its presence in the contested waters. AFP Chief of Staff Cirilito Sobejana has ordered the deployment of 3 additional Navy ships to the West Philippine Sea. Currently, the country has 2 ships in the territory, apart from the 3 vessels by the Coast Guard and BFAR. This is the country's largest presence in the territory to date.
It has been a directive of the Chief of Staff to increase our operational tempo here. And he has been lending us additional assets.
The National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea spotted 240 Chinese ships dispersed in the Philippines' territorial waters. Only 9 Chinese ships remain at the Julian Felipe Reef from last month's more than 200. But the Chinese vessels only transferred and scattered to other reefs and islands. Spanning 60 meters in length, these militia ships can illegally haul as much as 1 ton of fish every day.
They do not do fishing. If you have noticed in our previous reports, they are just bunched there and they are not still doing fishing.
The Foreign Affairs Department has lodged 2 diplomatic protests today. One is part of the vowed daily protest as long as Chinese ships are moored in the Julian Felipe Reef. The other is for the dispersal of Chinese vessels to other parts of the country's maritime zones. Former Justice Antonio Carpio also warned that China's success could spell the end of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS.
The nations of the world must unite to strongly push back China. Otherwise, UNCLOS will collapse. That will mean the demise of UNCLOS and the end of a rules-based maritime order. That will mean the beginning of a maritime order created and enforced by naval guns and the entrenchment of the might is right concept.
For News 5, Patricia Mangune, we are One News.
The Philippines has sent 3 additional Navy ships to the disputed West Philippine Sea and counter the lingering presence of Chinese ships. China has dispersed the vessels spotted near Julian Felipe Reef to several features it controls, but it has also sent 22 vessels in 4 of the Philippines' occupied territories. This could heighten tension, but is it wise for the Philippines to send its Navy to the disputed waters? To answer that, we have One News Defense Editor Manny Mugato. Good evening, Manny.
Good evening, Robbie. I think it is important for the Philippines to show its flag in this disputed territory. So we have to send our Navy ships, our Coast Guard ships, our BPAR vessels to constantly patrol and show and assert that this area is part of the Philippine EEZ, and therefore we have the economic rights to be there to exploit the resources in that area. And China has no business going there because they are robbing the Philippine people our economic resources.
But pero Manny, wasn't it just about, I think, 2 weeks ago where Defense Secretary Lorenzana was saying, ayaw nating tayong mauna supposedly na ma-militarize to. A lot of people found that statement ironic. What is the thinking now where it seems to be a much more categorical, clearer position to send our Navy ships there?
I think it is actually not incorrect to send the Navy because we have very limited capability. We have very limited ships that can go there, ocean-going ships that can reach that area. So it's only the Navy and the Coast Guard that can really constantly patrol and show our presence in that area. So it's also wise to send the Navy, but at a safer distance from the Chinese vessels because we don't want to provoke or accidents to happen in that area.
Hey, speaking of which, Manny, what might be China's reaction or anong dapat nating bantayan between these two actions? One, this daily diplomatic protest, and then two, this much more overt positioning by the Navy.
I think it's not enough to fire diplomatic protest every day and even show our flag in that area. But we also have to join other nations like US, Japan, and Australia in patrolling and doing naval exercises in that area because in that way we can show that we do not accept China's excessive claims on the South China Sea. The 200-mile exclusive economic zone is very far from Hainan. They do not have jurisdiction over that area. So we have to assert our claims on this territory.
Okay, maraming salamat, Manny. That was One News Defense Editor Manny Bogato. The Filipino business community is joining calls for China's withdrawal of its vessels from the West Philippine Sea. Tonight's big statement is from 8 business groups urging Beijing to respect the Philippine sovereignty. Business leaders, in a strongly worded statement, said the Philippines has exclusive rights over the Julian Felipe Reef as well as its resources. The groups even quoted former Chinese statesman Deng Xiaoping, who said the world must overthrow Beijing should it turn into a tyrant or an imperial power.
These are the other big stories tonight. In a span of 1 month, COVID fatality rate in Metro Manila almost triples to 5.36%. Close to 30% of deaths are among senior citizens. After the Senate, 17 House lawmakers also want to reverse the president's order lowering tariff on pork imports. And they're not yet done with it. The Environment Department resumes dumping fresh coats of dolomite sand along Manila Bay. These big stories after the
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Fatality rate has increased 3 times in Metro Manila, and what's worrying, more and more senior citizens are succumbing to the virus. What should be done to protect the elderly? Man Enriquez tells us in this report.
The pandemic became a family tragedy for 35-year-old Christina. All of 5 members of her household, including her mom, son, and cousin, tested positive for COVID on March 16. But it was Lola Roveva they were most concerned about. The senior citizen had a heart ailment. When she got infected, she had fever and found it difficult to breathe. She succumbed to the virus on the March 21st.
Kinaumagahan, ayun na. Nagkakagulo na. Nung morning, mga before 10, walang tumatanggap sa amin na hospital.
Her lola lends a face to the hundreds of Filipinos dying due to the virus the past few days. Most of them are senior citizens. Based on the report of UP Octa research team, before and after March 28, case fatality rate among those aged 65 and above rose to more than 28% from just 11.8 previously. For those 60 to 64 years old, it's also 3 times higher to 16.4%. Overall, fatality rate jumped from 1.82 to 5.36%. UP Octa Research Fellow Professor Guido David says the numbers are alarming.
We should give healthcare priority to seniors 60 and above because of the high mortality rates.
The country has had 15,000 deaths so far. As of April 13, more than 2,100 are from the 65 to 69 age group, followed by those aged 60 to 64 and the much older 70 to 74. This afternoon, 63-year-old Orlando Medina received his first dose of Sinovac vaccine.
Daming mga matatanda, kailangan namin magpabakuna kasi para makasiguro kami sa dami ng mga hawa-hawa ng COVID.
At the Ramon Magsaysay High School in España, some enthusiastic senior citizens fall in line as early as 5 a.m. to get inoculated.
First talaga kasi tinatanong sa kanila kung nagkaroon ba sila ng exposure o kaya na COVID ba sila. Kasi pag gano'n, i-hold muna natin hanggang sa for 2 weeks, hanggang sa totally naka-recover na po sila.
Octa Research urges seniors to strongly consider vaccination. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
The government's One Hospital Command Center admits struggles in accommodating increased number of calls. That's on top of discrepancies between available beds and patients who must be admitted. Romel Lopez has the details.
The number of people trying to reach the government's One Hospital Command Center for COVID-19 has tripled since August 2020.
From a mere 150 to 175 calls per day, when during this time of surge, we were already receiving 380 to almost 400 plus.
But due to the challenges, the command center management admits not being able to answer all calls.
We have landlines and cell phone number, but all of those po kasi ay engaged, very engaged po and congested din po yung lines natin. And then so that some of them po ay hindi na nakakapasok dun sa hotline.
The discrepancy between the available beds and the patients who need to be confined has made it more difficult.
Dapat yung mga asymptomatic cases natin and mild cases will be transferred to a level 1 hospital or even to an isolation facility so that they can decongest their hospitals so that they can accommodate more moderate and severe cases.
In an interview with 1PH sa Totoo Lang, NTF Special Advisor Dr. Ted Herbosa called this a mismatch.
Sometimes may tinatawag na mismatch, no? Marami silang bakanting bed pero pang moderate. Pero kung ikaw ay critical at walang ICU bed, yun yung magmumukhang maghihintay or maililipat ka sa ibang hospital.
Former Health Chief Esperanza Cabral also flagged leadership flaws which may contribute to another surge in cases.
Look at the case fatality rate. We have been so proud that the case fatality rate in the country is lower than the general or global case fatality rate. But now, it is coming up.
So far, the One Hospital Command has provided services to 24,000 callers since last year. The command center assures the public of continuous operation as it seeks additional beds.
I have to hire more people to receive my calls and make sure that they have the proper training. Second, I need to make sure that I have more open lines. And we are being supported naman sa PLDT.
Those who are in need of referral assistance may contact the command center using the numbers on your screen. For News 5, Rami Lopez, we are One News.
2 more vaccine manufacturers may soon be allowed to roll out their COVID-19 shots in the Philippines. Food and Drug Administration Director General Eric Domingo says Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine and India's Bharat Institute shots are being evaluated for emergency use authorization. He said vaccine experts are also looking into reports of blood clotting as a side effect of the J&J dose. Speaking with One News Agenda, Domingo also said the agency is set to release guidelines on AstraZeneca vaccines within the week. They have already received recommendations from the World Health Organization and the DOST vaccine expert panel.
The benefit outweighs the risk. Kasi nga these are such rare occurrences. Magkakaroon tayo ng bagong guidance kung ano lang yung what to watch out for na symptoms para in case you do feel any of these, then you have to approach your healthcare provider at kailangan mapaghandaan din po kung paano ma-manage yung mga pasyente.
Time for our next news look at some of the day's big stories. The Environment Department has resumed dumping dolomite sand along a portion of the Manila Baywalk. The supplier was again allowed to transport dolomite from Cebu after being suspended due to environmental issues. The DENR later clarified that it is still part of the 389 million rehabilitation project, noting that they have to finish filling the 1 meter thick requirement to prevent it from being washed out. 17 lawmakers seek to reverse President Duterte's order to cut pork import tariffs. The lawmaker filed a House Joint Resolution to reverse Executive Order 128, which slashed levies on imported pork to as low as 5% and increased allowable pork imports by 749%. They warned that the further decline of the local pork industry has an effect on other industries using pork products. A tropical storm 1,000 kilometers east of Mindanao may enter the Philippine area of responsibility by Friday. Once it enters PAR, Tropical Storm Surigay will be called Bising. It will be the country's second tropical cyclone for the year. According to Pag-asa, Surigay remains less likely to directly affect the country over the next 3 days. The NDRRMC has already directed its regional and local offices to prepare. Time for another quick break. When we return. After 2 decades since the 2001 Twin Tower attacks, the U.S. will be pulling out its troops in Afghanistan by September 11. And a school in Spain is ditching online learning for some open-air classes right by the beach. A look at their setup after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Not all NCR Plus bubble residents are created equal, and nowhere is that more evident than in the distribution of government assistance. Mobile journalist Stanley Gahete gives us a front seat to this story.
After the ayuda giving last week, we found Nancy and her family on the sidewalk of busy 18th Avenue eating scraps of food. She belongs to the poorest of the poor, yet she did not qualify for cash assistance because she had no documents to prove her poverty.
wala daw kami ID, kuha daw kami ID. At abulin po namin, wala rin po kami magagawa. Kasi tingin nila sa amin, ganito lang.
Arturo Romingkit owns car that he leases for his rent-a-car business. With the recent rounds of lockdowns, his livelihood was again affected. And there was Sunshine, whose husband is an ambulance driver.
Siguro deserve din naman namin na makatanggap ng ayuda. Kasama kami sa gobyerno.
Arturo and Sunshine were among the 3,982 beneficiaries in San Roque, Cubao, Quezon City who received the cash assistance last week. LGUs also have the discretion if they will also include beggars in the list. In Nancy's case, she was not.
If it's part of your jurisdiction, consider that.
According to the DILG, they have given assistance to 1.7 million beneficiaries in the NCR+. As of April 11, only about 8% of the funds allotted under the Social Amelioration Program has been disbursed according to the DSWD. There were beneficiaries who were long dead or in the provinces or overseas. Sadek is a PWD working abroad. While he deserves to be in the list, he still questions it.
May narinig ako kasi na maraming PWD din na wala sa list. Even my name was not, hindi siya na-spell lang tama eh.
DSW says there's a grievance committee who will handle complaints. What is important is that the assistance has already begun to roll out. But for Nancy and her kids, they have fallen through the cracks in the system yet again.
Karaos namin tong araw nito, baka bukas na naman, yun na naman iniisip namin.
Stanley Gehete, We Are One News.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. From the Freeman News, Cebu City commemorates 500 years of Christianity by reenacting the first baptism. The reenactment took place beside the structure that houses Magellan's Cross right outside the Basilica Minore del Santo Niño. The city also unveiled a restored monument in honor of Italian chronicler Antonio Gaffetta at the Plaza Independencia. Business World Live reports the Philippines may miss its 6.5% economic growth target this year. This following a surge in COVID-19 cases and the implementation of the strictest lockdown classification for 2 weeks. But Economic Planning Secretary Carl Chua said the economy may still recover by fast-tracking the rollout of vaccines, reopening areas with few infections, and accelerating government spending. And this from News 5, President Duterte and Russian President Vladimir Putin had a 30-minute phone conversation Tuesday. Duterte told his Russian counterpart of the government's plan to purchase 20 million Sputnik V doses. The two presidents also discussed what they described to be a steady progress in defense cooperation.
And here are the other big stories around the world. U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to pull out all of America's troops from Afghanistan by September 11. That will be exactly 20 years since the Al-Qaeda attack on the U.S., which triggered America's longest war. This decision pushes back the previously announced May 1 deadline that was negotiated between the Trump administration and the Taliban. Critics also warn that the move does not assure peace, as the Afghan government will likely struggle to hold the Taliban at bay. The streets of Myanmar have turned bloody yet again, but this time with red paint. Activists in Myanmar splashed red paint and dye on roads and signs outside government offices to challenge the military coup. The red paint represents the blood of those killed while protesting against the junta. The group says more than 700 protesters have been killed since the coup started.
For the big story in sports, Michael Martinez has started a fundraising campaign in his bid to qualify for the 2022 Winter Olympics. Martinez plans to compete in the Olympic qualifying tournament in Germany from September 22 to 25. He set up a GoFundMe link in the hope of raising money needed for his training expenses. And the two-time Olympian was the country's lone delegate to the 2014 and 2018 Winter Olympic Games.
It's a wrap! 90s sitcom Friends has just finished filming its much-awaited reunion special. Friends, the reunion will feature the iconic 6 cast members. In a radio interview last March, David Schwimmer, or Ross, said they won't be in character for the reunion, but rather themselves. The special will stream on HBO Max soon.
Don't bother, darlings. I own the place. What did? I got the candy counter girl to bring us some snacks.
House. I have to defend it.
Where's your mother?
My mom's in the car.
Continuing her trip to the 90s, Home Alone star Macaulay Culkin just had a baby. He just had a son with a Sweet Life star Brenda Song, who is number 33.
Kids are stupid.
Macaulay named their baby Dakota after his late sister who died in a car accident in 2008. The couple started dating in 2017. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Distance learning is so 2020, at least for an elementary school in Spain. A school from Murcia City holds physical classes by the beach. Outside of Felix Rodriguez de la Fuente School, children aged 3 to 12 attend classes on the sandy shores of the Playa de los Nietos. They're wearing masks, sitting in rows of green desks neatly spaced out. 8 class bubbles take part in 20-minute lessons rotating through different areas. And it's not just a breakaway from distance learning, it's part of a broader study on open-air learning during the pandemic. There have been no reported cases in the setup so far.
You know, that actually gave me an idea.
Another one.
Pwede tayong magganyan. Sa Manila Bay. Di ba may beach na tayo doon? Yung Manila classes pwede ilipat
Sa Manila Bay pa. Sa buong bansa, we have the longest shorelines all over the in the world. And it looks like, I can imagine a lot of towns now saying, hey, we can do that.
That's great. Pero sayang naman yung 389 million, di ba? Doon na lang din. That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. We are One News. Have a good evening.